The first set I wanted to go over is a lance set, and this is my general purpose set. Yeah, this set, or and slight variations of it, have basically replaced my Fiendish Tower sets. Partially that's just due to the fact that I'm tired of looking like I'm carrying a Christmas tree on my back. So I want just something else to look at, more or less. And the fact that it comes with razor sharp and sharpening hasn't been an issue is really nice, combined with the fact that I still don't have the tear-off claw. And so this is basically the best that I can do. And I'm actually really happy with it. It's been performing really well. You can just stack so many skills on some of the mixes just because it has those extra 2-3 slots. That's so helpful when making builds. But yeah, that's about it for this set. This is kind of, like I said, just my general use set, solid performer. The next set here is kind of a specialty set. It's not one that I use all the time, but it's basically a critical element dragon set. The only times I really use it is against something that's got 3-star weakness to dragon, so not a ton of monsters, but it is a really cool looking lance, and so I always like having kind of an up-to-date set that allows me to use Love Sorrow. And basically this whole set, it serves that purpose, and it's like a justifiable excuse that I can use to use Love Sorrow, have it in a set, and kind of enjoy the weapon once again, instead of using Joe's lance, which has for the longest time been the only lance I used regardless of the matchup. My only issue with building a critical element set around Love Sorrow is the fact that you pretty much need like Handicraft 3 or 4. Handicraft 2, even with Protective Polish, you are going to be sharpening a lot. It is a teeny little sliver of white sharpness. So that's kind of one of the big downsides, the fact that you pretty much need to put in a pretty good amount of skill points. So it's kind of a little bit investment heavy just to get up and running, I feel like. And this isn't like a fully optimized critical element set by any means. I'm sure someone can, with better decorations, can put together a better one out there, but it is a good starting point for me, at least, for when I want to use Love Sorrow. Sometimes you just want to use the weapon that you like the most, and who cares about min-maxing, or it's definitely going to be a DPS loss in most cases though. But it's like, if I'm 30 seconds slower on a hunt, I mean, is that really, if I'm not speedrunning, I don't think it matters. So I try to sneak Love Sorrow in there whenever I can. It's a cool looking lance. And I actually have 2 copies of it. The one here that I'm showing is kind of augmented for affinity, but I also have another one that's augmented for health. So for some of my peak performance, that's obviously I'm going to use that. So yeah, we can call this set the excuse to use Vaal's lance set. So this next set here is the only Greatsword set that I use. I have maybe a couple others with very, very slight differences, but pretty much this is it. For me, this is the pinnacle Greatsword set. And I know a lot of people are going to immediately say that there is no focus on this set, and that is correct, because I don't run focus. I know that most of the top players run it. I know that I've seen a ton of speed runs and people use it. But for me, I don't feel like it makes that big of a difference. I'd rather stack a bunch of extra attack skills than just have one skill that focuses on speeding up the charge slash. I feel like with the introduction of the tackle in Monster Hunter World, that you really don't need that as much. I mean, most of the time I'm going to be tackling through an attack or through a roar, and that is what's going to give me plenty of time to set up that charge slash. And I mean, 20% faster, I mean, yeah, it might get you an extra hit in, but I think with some practice, you could have maybe just tackled through sooner, or, done, change your positioning a little bit, and then not needed the focus, and then have your hits land with even more impact. I mean, that's the theory anyway. So yeah, that's pretty much why I don't really run focus on my Greatsword sets. I definitely used to run focus in 3U and 4U because I felt like it lent itself better to the gameplay in those games. But now with Greatsword being just so much more of a dynamic weapon, I don't really see the absolute need for it. Whereas in the older games, I felt like it was a 100% that I needed it. I couldn't play with it. So I get where people are coming from if they're feeling that, because I was feeling the exact same way in the older games. And it was weird at first to not put it on there, but it is what it is. All right, so this next set here is actually a Charge Blade set. Not a weapon that I play too often, but it is a weapon that I've definitely fallen in love with ever since the Dante DLC. I actually got the thought for this set after seeing Saita's set and his run against Nergigante. For a while, it was the fastest time for a TA rules run against Nerg, and he did it with an Earplugs 5 set, which really got me thinking. And I mean, it kind of does make a lot of sense. Charge Blade, I mean, you've got to charge up your sword, right? Then you've got to charge up your shield, and then you've got to charge up your files, and then the whole process of releasing the element discharge, that process, takes a bunch of time. So there's just all these little pit stops I feel like that Charge Blade has to make while playing that you've got to kind of manage. And Earplugs, it really just lets you focus on the hunt and not about when you're going to do these things. And it's especially useful for monsters that roar very frequently. Nerg obviously comes to mind. I would even say potentially you could try something like this on Vol.2. And as you can see, this set is using the Empress Alma sticks. The point of this set when I first made it was to fight Kulve Teroth. For whatever reason, I just have so much of an easier time fighting her with Charge Blade. I mean, even with Lance, with Greatsword, sometimes, I guess not so much with Greatsword, but definitely with Lance. I feel like I have to mind my positioning a bit more against Kulve, just to prevent getting caught in a lava spew or a bad time to sheathe. And with Greatsword, obviously, you can kind of just hit and run, but I feel like I don't break as many parts. But with a good Charge Blade set, I'm consistently doing, 8, 9, 10 parts per hunt, which is great. And I haven't tried this too much against any of the other monsters because it's been mostly my Kulve Teroth, my Anti-Kulve Teroth set. But I do want to practice a little bit more with Charge Blade and then maybe start taking that against some of the other monsters and see how this set performs. But I love Earplugs. It's funny actually because Earplugs used to be one of my staple skills in the older games, in 3U, especially in 3U, but in 4U as well. I would pretty much not have a set that didn't have Earplugs. So many of the weapons got various upgrades in this game that it's not as necessary. But for this instance, for Charge Blade, I do like it because I feel like the skill does have quite a bit of synergy with Charge Blade itself. And so even though it's a 5-point skill and that's a pretty heavy investment, but overall, I do think it's worth it. And it's been a really nice set, especially going from non-earplug Charge Blade sets to this one. It's kind of been very freeing. And then the only other thing to say about this set is the fact that, of course, I'm using Charge Blade, but I'm not using the Diablos Charge Blade, so it must be terrible, right? But it actually performs really well. Once again, like all the other Luna weapons, like I said earlier, I use this set mostly for Kulve Teroth anyway, so I like having that extra sharpness. Not having to sharpen as much really helps. And the damage isn't that much lower, but the quality of life for the weapon is much nicer, and so it kind of makes up for things in that respect. All right, now we have another Lance set. And this is basically just a variation of the first Lance set that I've shown, but I've taken guard out and replaced it with attack. So this is for those monsters where you don't really need any guard skills. Nergigante, of course, most of the lower threat 1 and threat 2 monsters, for the most part, you're not really going to ever need guard skills against them. They just don't have moves that are strong enough to push you back. A few here and there, like Odogaron, you may need guard because some of his attacks will push you back. A few attacks from the Wraths family may push you back, but for the most part, yeah, you're not always going to need guard to make the set effective. I mean, just the power guard itself, if it's a kind of a minor attack, is going to take that force. So in those instances, it's nice to have a set that doesn't have guard on it, so it's not eating up those valuable skill points, and you can just dump everything, you know, more skills into attack, into affinity, or into survivability if that's what your build is geared towards. So yeah, this would be my, we could call it my standard non-guard lance set for all those monsters. But other than that, it's essentially identical. I mean, there's some of these sets, the way I've set them up is I can literally just swap the charm, swap a jewel or two, and then that set will transition. But yeah, I wanted to throw at least one non-guard set in there just to kind of show that without guard, and especially if you're using the sticks, if you're a lance user, I mean, the amount of skills you can stack is just insane. All right, in our second to last set, I have a Master's Touch set. This set is a Master's Touch set that does not have peak performance. Sometimes I like to make kind of two versions of some sets, and the next one I show will have peak performance. But, you know, for the fights that peak performance isn't really viable in, like, for example, recently we had Arch-Tempered Vaal Hazak, and I really didn't feel like it was a smart move to run peak performance during that hunt, just because of his aura being so much stronger than, of course, all the miasma down there in the Rotten Vale. It was just not a good situation for a peak performance build. So it's always nice to make sure you kind of have sets to meet those other needs, right? Even if there's a certain skill set that you really like, you want to make sure you have kind of backup sets, whether that's like taking out defensive skills and stacking offense, or, you know, maybe mixing up a few things here and there so that you can kind of meet the needs of the challenge at hand. And one of the things for this set in particular to pay attention to is the fact that, so I've got the Luna Lance, that right there is giving me Razor Sharp, and then I also have Master's Touch. For most hunts, that is going to be way, way overkill. You likely won't need any points in Handicraft, so you could easily just, on this set for instance, get rid of the Death Stench Heal Beta. I mean, it is nice if you're fighting maybe like an Arch-Tempered that's going to have more HP, or something like Kulve Teroth, or, you know, one of those hunts where you know the fight is going to last a long time, like 5+ minutes regardless. That's a lot of hits. You can hit a monster a lot of times in 5 minutes. So if they're still alive after that, then I would maybe consider it. But for the most part, I mean, the other thing I would say is if you just absolutely hate sharpening, then mixing the two, putting the Luna Xeno on a Master's Touch set is pretty much a way to guarantee that you're never going to have to sharpen, especially if your affinity's high. So even though this set doesn't get used often, I still like having it around for those times where if I don't run peak performance, I'd like to already have a kind of an up-to-date set built, ready to go, so I can just equip it and go do the hunt, and then kind of it frees up my options. So I like having lots and lots of sets just kind of laying around. I like to keep them updated just for situations, so I'm always kind of maximizing my efficiency, right? Even if the sets themselves aren't maximized, my access to them and my access to the sets that I desire are. So all right, and for the last set that I have here, this is a Peak Performance Guard 3 Luna Lance Master's Touch set. Damn, that's a mouthful. I used actually a very slight variation of this set for my recent Odegaron time attack. And I have a couple different variations. I'm always tweaking and testing different stuff out in all the sets, but this one is kind of the base set, and I build off of it. One thing that I really like about this set is the natural synergy that the Luna Lance has with the Teostra set. So when you're building the Master's Touch, you're most likely going to pick up a couple points of blast anyway. And in some of my sets, I'll just gem in that last point because, hey, why not? It's already there. So you'll be getting a little bit of extra damage from blast when it procs against the monsters. But the real cool thing, of course, is the fact that you don't have to put in any points into handicraft. The Luna Xenolance comes with enough sharpness, and that combined with Razor Sharp and Master's Touch really makes it that, I mean, I rarely have to sharpen, or I just end up running out of sharpness like right as the hunt is ending. And in those situations, I just don't feel like it's worth it. Most likely for that, it's just that you're likely not hitting weak spots enough to trigger Master's Touch. So it's usually sloppy play. That's what's gonna stop you and make you sharpen when you're running a set like this. It's usually not the amount of sharpness you have, unless of course you're fighting one of the larger health pool monsters like I mentioned earlier. So in those cases there may be a legitimate concern about adding a point or two of handicraft, but for most of the monsters you're not ever going to need to. But that's gonna pretty much wrap everything up here. Hope you enjoyed it, maybe got some ideas for sets of your own. I mean, these sets are definitely not, meta or cutting edge by any means, and I wanted to share the sets I'm using right now, kind of just to go over them. It's been a little while since I've made that peak performance video, like a couple months ago. But anyway, I hope you have a good day and happy hunting.